then I did a little ring around where like a pant leg would end, and I kind of go up the opposite side with that. And what you get are you get two different islands, one for the front, and one for the back. They almost kind of look like, those full like they look like a pair of long johns. And then for the hands, actually, the hands are a little tougher. What you want to do, and I realize that so the way every character's hands work in DMT, because they're so far away, there's really no sense in doing fingers. So when you do game characters, the two places where you're going to get most facial geometry buildup is in the face and in the fingers. And for these zombies especially, because they're not really emoting, we are leaving the facial features, if you can see, there's no like interior of the mouth or anything. And then same here, there's no fingers. So what we do with hands, though, is you cut it off at the wrist. So you select, like the loop around the wrist, and then you start from that loop. You go around, and again, kind of like the side, there's no seam running down the exact center. Actually, let me create one so it's easier to demonstrate this. And then let me clear all the seams so I can show you cutting the seam myself. So I can do, if I cut this seam, and then I need to cut the seam around the fingers. Now, if he had all of his fingers, I would do this around each one. And I don't want to do just like the loop select, because that would, well, actually there's a way I can do it. It's, what is it? It's like control, yeah. So if you do, in Blender, if you control click something, I'll show it to you. So if I pick this, and then I pick this, and I control select, see, that's why you don't always use it, because it doesn't always get it right. So often, the idea, what I'm trying to do is if I control select, I can get it to do this, and actually if you do it in increments, it's a little easier. Control select. Okay, so sometimes you can stack the different things you're doing, but I guess not with shift control select. Alright, so if I go around here and, okay, let's stop there. If I cut my seam there, actually let me add one more just to be safe. What I can do is, if I unwrap this, okay, so again, you want it to be as clean as possible, so this is a pretty clean UV for a hand, and that's how you want to cut through a hand. So anyway, like, yeah, you can do a very minimal amount of cuts, and you get a very nice outcome with the way I did it. So back to the, let me cancel this guy out. So back to our deer. So that's how you do some pretty efficient cutting, and I wanted to show the human character especially because, I mean, let's face it, game artists, we do probably about 90% humanoid characters. You do like an animal very occasionally. I mean, and for all I know, there could be an RPG designer going like, I make I make direwolves all the time, really, at least in my experience, and granted I make a lot of zombie games, I tend to do a lot more humanoid characters, but the same principles apply. I mean, really, once you've made a humanoid character, you can make most anything. And if you have a nice guide, it makes everything that much easier. So we have here a deer, and again, same kind of mindset. You want to make very, very selective cuts, and that way you get a nice, neat, more seamless. You want to have a nice, very seamless UV set, like here. And the other thing I should have mentioned is that when you do UV cuts, you really want to think about where seams should and should not be. It's good to put seams in hidden places, so that's why you know on a human it's okay to have seams along the sides of the body, because for the most part people aren't really going to necessarily uh, look there. Also, a lot of times there's clothing seams there anyway, so if a pattern doesn't quite match up, it's not going to break anything. It's not going to break, the player's sense of immersion in the game and suddenly mess with how they look at the thing you've created. On the flip side, if you and we actually ran into this, if you have a character with bare arms, not the arms of a bear, but like without shirt sleeves, um, having the seam run along the top where it's where like the muscles and everything is going to show up, especially if you have any like tattoos or anything along that part, it's not going to be, that's where you don't want a seam. So sometimes with that character, for example, actually it happened with the redneck um, character, and let me show you what I mean. So I don't have a good shot of that arm, but on his T pose, on his A pose here, it would have gone along the top of the arm, like where the where the cursor is, and that really just would not have been very good. So I actually cut the UV seam where the shirt meant the arm, um, and isolated the arm itself. And again, breaking my own rules that I just showed you with that one character, but for this case, I made an exception. So keep that in mind. There's the general guideline, make it very simple, but you can break that rule if you ever need to. Again, so what I ended up doing was I put a seam along here, and then I put a seam along the bottom of the arm. And that allowed us to put like muscle definition and like a tattoo on his arm. Which, can you kind of see it here? No. I would show it to you. I just really don't want to spend a whole lot more time showing off or having to download the character. um, Normally I'd have it already loaded, but that one just kind of came to me. So anyway, so that's cutting. Now what I want to show you guys is some of the texture files. So here's the texture file for the deer, and it doesn't really look like a whole lot, but that's because I have, and I'm not going to show you digital painting. I have it already pre-prepared, but I'll just show you how it comes together. It doesn't look like a whole lot. That's because I've hidden all the layers. So if I start bringing ones up, there I have, the white on the belly. There I have the detailing, and I'm going to leave it at that right now. And so what you do with this is, and granted, I actually could have gone even further. I could have gone into, well, one color is a like the highlights are a layer and the shadows are a layer, or I could have done like the facial features are on their own layer. All the black stuff like the hooves and everything are on their own layer. And what's nice about that is that you can actually use the layer styles. Actually, in Photoshop, I'm showing it in GIMP, but in Photoshop on the belly layer, on the white layer here, I had put a drop shadow. But I didn't use a drop shadow like one would use a drop shadow just to get just sort of like make it look like it's coming off a page. I made the drop shadow work in such a way where it was just sort of like and I guess I could have done it with outer glow as well, but I made it basically one of these dark brown colors and had it just sort of fade out around the white area. And the benefit of that was to just add a little bit of detail. You can kind of see it. Where is it? You can kind of see it here. It's very soft, but you can kind of see it in here. And that, I mean, again, it just added a nice seam there. You can kind of see it in there. Little bit of interesting color to it, but the reason you want to separate things is that one, you can use those different layer tricks. Like I wanted to add a little visual interest with the shadow, so I did. I isolated that part and added visual interest. Same thing goes with adding glow effects. Sometimes a subtle bevel or emboss can be nice. I remember back in college with Photoshop, somebody said, don't make it look Photoshoppy, but if you're really subtle with these tools, they actually can be very powerful. Just don't, learn to don't rely on them too much. But the other thing you can do is, and to use these layers really effectively. I mean, really, this is the most powerful thing about Photoshop and GIMP is their layers. So if I can start, well, like I said, I put the shadowing and the shading on one layer. That lets me have that isolated without having it interfere with the base color. Which sometimes it's nice to have it mix with the base color. Sometimes it's nice to keep it isolated. But what you can also do is you can start adding this stuff. And in our case, we wanted to have, again, zombie damage. Because, so again, we have a deer, and then just by changing a texture, all of a sudden we have a zombie deer. And I mean, that's not the only difference. We actually have, where are they? Deer run, deer zombie. Okay. So here's our zombie deer walk. And so we animated him having his own walk. It's actually the same deer model, but as you can see, we have all these different conditions for it. So we even have a die. Yeah. So we have all these different things it can do, and what's nice is we just change the texture and it becomes a different character altogether. And what you do with this is really just, again, in a Photoshop file, you just start adding layers of stuff. So we have, and typically what I do with zombies is I'll have like a damage layer, and then I'll have sort of a dirt layer, because zombies are always a little dirtier than everything else. And then I have like a blood layer. And then actually this layer right here, this is kind of an interesting layer. This is the UV layer. This is the thing that I use when I start drawing. So in Blender, I can export, if I go back to the UV image editor, I can take these UVs and I can go to UV export and save it as an image file. And then that's what you can load into something like GIMP. And you have this template from which, I mean, it's basically coloring. You're basically coloring it. So you have this nice template here. So that's what that layer is. And again, in Photoshop, and I'm sorry, I don't have Photoshop in this computer. But what you can do is you can add a layer, and I apologize any GIMP users. I'm actually not, I don't know this feature of GIMP. New layer, background color, layer type, cancel. Okay. I actually don't know how to do this with GIMP. I can probably click around and figure it out, but I'm not going to right now. Actually, let me try this. What I did in Photoshop to get sort of the greenish color is I applied an adjustment layer to it, and that let me turn everything below it. So I did everything that was under the zombie damage. So this layer that I'm clicking on and off, it was everything that's below zombie damage. I changed its hue and saturation to be sort of this desaturated green, and then that let me have it be like zombie deer. So you can see that these tools are very popular when used, or very popular, very powerful when all used together. And again, it's all about modularity. So, like last week when we turned one character into